everybody, and welcome back. Good to talk to all of you again today. And today I've got a somewhat long video for all of you, covering the UK battleships from Tier 3 all the way to Tier 10. Now initially my plan was to make individual videos for each ship, however testing has taken a little bit longer than I had anticipated. And unfortunately I am going to be going to the Let's Battle Tour event in Conqueror, Ohio this weekend, and then on to the U.S. Air Force Museum, and then of course to go see USS Little Rock. So I'll be gone for a couple of days, and I figured I might as well just put all of my impressions into one video so you guys have a pretty good feel about these UK battleships. Now, before I get started, formalities first. UK battleships are work in progress, which means that anything I talk about in this video can and potentially will change by the time these ships come out onto the live servers. Also, these ships were provided by Wargaming for testing purposes. Yes, I do have to say that every single time I make a work in progress video, but with the formalities out of the way now, let's go ahead and start talking about the ships themselves. Tier 3, Bellerophon. Very, very nice battleship. For a couple of reasons. One, she is nicely protected. Now, when I say nicely protected, she is vulnerable to HE. Now, if you look at the superstructure armor, she's got a nice big superstructure, 10 millimeters there. You look at the forward bow area, 16 millimeters. Yeah, she is going to be vulnerable to HE. However, keep in mind, Tier 3 cruisers that are HE spammers don't always have the most amount of range on their guns. And with the Bellerophon's main battery firing range, you are able to stay at the outer limits of cruiser range, which means that you're not always going to be dealing with that much HE. And so, in a lot of cases, you should be able to do okay. Aside from HE, however, you're very well protected against armor piercing. Take a look, and you'll notice, it looks like the Bellerophon has a turtle back. And she does. And the turtle back is going to make the Bellerophon very, very forgiving for new players if they show a little bit too much side, and the enemy battleship knows how to use armor piercing. You're likely to see maybe penetration damage, but not so much in terms of citadel hits. So Bellerophon, in terms of protection, armor-wise, I think is quite good. Although she does have that vulnerability to HE. But again, you can sort of mitigate it by maneuvering, and of course, using that nice range you do have on your main battery guns. Her main battery guns, 305 millimeter. You got 8 of them per side, 10 total, but of course one turret's, these wing turrets. So yeah, 8 per side, and they're okay. These are pretty nice guns. Damage-wise, they're all right. Max AP shell damage of 8,100. When I played with them, their penetration seemed to be quite sufficient at Tier 3, as I was able to do pretty decent damage against Tier 3 battleships and even some Tier 4 battleships, so no issues there. Really nice thing, of course, is the main battery firing range. 15 kilometers is very nice for a Tier 3 battleship, and it does allow you to at times stay outside of those annoying cruiser HE ranges, so you can actually shoot at them and they can't really do much back. Furthermore, other things to keep in mind about the Bellerophon's main guns is that while their horizontal dispersion is similar to, I think they're identical actually, to USN battleship horizontal dispersion, the vertical dispersion I think actually is not bad. Now, all the time I played with the Bellerophon, I got pretty good groupings on salvos, with her guns. So I feel like that vertically, she might actually be doing quite well in terms of the vertical dispersion. So when you look at that full circle for dispersion, the Bellerophon, well actually the UK line as a whole, does quite well. Her sigma value of 1.8 also means that, she is going to get reasonably nice groupings with her shells. Alright, AA defense. Bellerophon, not really too much AA, but then again, she's Tier 3. So really, who kind of, cares about her AA defense? You're not going to see that many carriers, and in the event that you do see Tier 4 carriers, they don't really have that manual drop anymore. So as long as you maneuver and you turn into torpedo bombers, you should do fine with the Bellerophon. Bellerophon does have other nice things about her as well. Her max speed, 22.5 knots, is nice and fast for a Tier 3 battleship. If you compare her to like South Carolina or Kawachi, I mean, Bellerophon is zippy. She will get places faster than those other tier 3 battleships. Turning circle radius of 560 meters is certainly not awful. A little bit worse than, the South Carolina, which turns in record time, but when you compare it to things like the Kawachi, her turning radius is right on par there. So, not bad for a tier 3 battleship. Rudder shift time, 11.7 seconds. For a battleship, not bad at all. Detectability surface, 13.3 kilometers. Of course, if you have, like these 10-point UK captains waiting and you have, let's say, concealment expert, you're going to be able to get these battleships to an even stealthier level. Although, personally, I do recommend that if you are going to take a captain and put it into a UK battleship, you should actually skill for fire prevention first. Having that 2 center fires become only 1 fire does make UK battleships, the whole line, from 3 to 10, that much more durable. So that is something I would definitely recommend. All in all, Bellerophon I find to be a very, very good tier 3 battleship, and I think people, when they play her, they're going to have a lot of fun. And then, of course, you move on to the Orion. So you go from a very, very good tier 3 battleship to a very, very, very good tier 4 battleship. I almost said Bellerophon again, but Orion, here we go, getting the name correct. The Orion is spectacular for a tier 4 battleship. Maybe not to the level of the Nikolai, I know, but very, very nice again. So, the Orion. And what makes her stand out is a couple of things. One, she's, again, a very, very nicely protected battleship. Once again, if you take it away, she, again, is a little bit vulnerable to high explosive, make no mistake. Like, all the Royal Navy battleships are going to be vulnerable to HE from cruisers of their tier, pretty much. So, I'll get to that, with the later ones, you'll see it. But, again, Orion, a little bit vulnerable to HE, but again, not that vulnerable to the armor piercing, which means that when other ships shoot AP, especially other battleships, you're not likely to get Citadel. It's kind of like the way the German battleships are. Aside from that particular trait, the Orion's main guns I find to be very, very nice. Nice patterns, generally quite tight in terms of dispersion patterns, even though the Sigma is only 1.8. So my guess is because, and again, the Bellerophon, the Orion, when I see those nice sort of shell dispersion patterns, I always think that it has something to do with the vertical dispersion. Now, unfortunately, we don't have exact vertical dispersion numbers for, X range for all the ships in the game. In my prior testing, generally speaking, the Royal Navy's vertical dispersion is very, very nice, which means that their dispersion circles tend to be better than the other nations. Even though horizontal dispersion looks sort of similar, their vertical tends to be quite nice, which means that as long as their sigma values are respectable, in which case for the Orion's 1.8, you're going to see shells that are grouped up nice and tight. As for the main guns on the Orion, you've got 10 of these 343mm guns. They have very nice HE damage, which, even though most times I would say don't shoot a lot of HE, with the Royal Navy battleships, HE actually does become a viable weapon. I know, kind of scary. Their fire chance tends to be quite high as well, in this case 40%. Kind of nuts. AP damage, of course, nice at 9,500. The one complaint, I guess, for me for the Orion was that the turrets, well, they're kind of the old Warspite turrets. They turn very slowly. But then again, you can use your ship to help it out by turning your ship, showing a little bit more of that side. Again, ideally you want to stay angled, but if you have to, you can risk showing that little bit more side without being worried about being outright deleted from Citadel hits. Aside from that, the Orion also has very good gun angles. So if you look at a ship with a similar sort of turret configuration, you think the New York. And the New York, has a very awkward angle for that center turret. The Orion, no such thing. She's able to get all 5 of her turrets out, I think at about a 35-degree angle, if I remember correctly. I think it's like that. But you're able to stay reasonably well angled while bringing all of your firepower out, which makes the Orion a very, very good battleship. On top of that, she also has a very good main battery firing range at tier 4, 16.7 kilometers, which means that you're going to be able to engage cruisers from range, and of course with that nice dispersion, should be a comfortable experience. Now the Orion does have secondary guns, And she has quite a large number of them, but 3.5 kilometer range. Yeah, you're not really gonna be getting much out of them, so definitely don't build for secondaries. Would not recommend it. She has some AA defense, but nothing really all that amazing. It's a tier 4 battleship. Don't expect much there, right? So yeah, she is going to be at least somewhat vulnerable to carriers, but then again, don't forget tier 4 and 5 carriers don't have manual drop anymore. It's all auto now. So if you turn into the planes and you preempt their drop with the turns, most times you're not going to be taking too much damage from them. So not really that much of a threat. Maximum speed, 22 knots. Again, a reasonable speed for a tier 4 battleship. Not as fast as something like the Miyogi, but definitely faster than the Wyoming, for example. So it's not bad. 22 knots is okay. Turning circle radius of 610 meters is quite good. You're going to be able to turn in a nice tight circle. Rudder shift time, 12.5 seconds, is pretty good for a battleship. Surface detectability a little bit higher than the Bellerophon at 14.4. Although, again, if you have, let's say, a 14-point captain, you've got concealment expert, and of course, again, fire extinguishing, really important, you should be a nice and stealthy battleship. All in all, I found the Orion, when I played her, to be a very, very nice battleship. Earlier today, I was involved in a 5-on-1 at the end, and I nearly came out on top in that battle, sinking 4 out of the last 5 ships. Unfortunately, the last ship I killed managed to get off at the very last second, a few torpedoes, and that managed to get me at very close range, with the last cruiser that I was shooting at almost dying to me. So for me, just a very, very good tier 4 battleship, and I would definitely say this one's a keeper, assuming she stays in her current state. Moving on to tier 5, and you have the Iron Duke. And the Iron Duke is the Orion slightly improved. If you look at the Iron Duke and you look at things like the secondary, she has a little bit more range on her secondary guns. Her AA is a little bit better. She's a touch bit faster. In terms of armor, she's actually very similar, like slight improvements here and there. Still has that turtle back. But the Iron Duke just, it's not as great as the Orion, and you're probably wondering why. And mind you, the Iron Duke isn't like a bad battleship. If you compare her to something like a New York or something like that, she's probably better. But what sucks for the Iron Duke is matchmaking. Unfortunately, when you get taken in, especially with tier 5s these days, and you get taken up constantly to tier 7 battles, it's just not fun, Sure, you could basically play as a slow HE spamming support battleship at tier 7, but it's just not the kind of fun and, thing you'll get with the Orion. Iron Duke at tier like 5 battles is okay, but you start putting her up into those like tier 7 battles and she really does struggle. And unfortunately you see more tier 7 battles than you see tiers where you're at the top tier. So for me, if I have to say, in terms of how good the ships are, I would say the Orion and Iron Duke are kind of similar. Iron Duke being a better ship, but again, being 1 tier higher, the enjoyment you're going to get out of her is probably going to be lower. So, a little bit more meh than the Orion. Moving up to tier 6, and we get to the Queen Elizabeth class of battleships, which, wait a minute, this is, well, basically the Warspite. Yes, it is. There are some subtle differences between the Queen Elizabeth and the Warspite, and, well, I would say that if you like the Warspite in her older form, before she had that turret traverse buff, if you liked her then, you're going to like the QE now. If you hated the Warspite then, yeah, the Queen Elizabeth is going to, well, she's not going to win you over. First things first, if you take a look at the ship, protection-wise, she's basically a Warspite. Pretty much all, in every single sense of the word, identical. She is, same sort of protection scheme. Yeah, she has a bit of that turtle back. Yeah, basically Warspite in terms of protection. Her main battery guns, however, is where things are a little bit different. She's got the old turret traverse time, 72 seconds. It is slow. However, dispersion is good, and you are going to see those really nice, tight dispersion that like whoa, you know. If you look at, you know, the Warspice dispersion, QE is going to have that, and it's wonderful. Main battery firing range, 17.1 kilometers, is nice. Warspice range, if you guys remember, little bit shorter than the QE at 16.3. The Queen Elizabeth has a little bit more reach. So that's a positive. In terms of the actual guns themselves, in terms of damage and everything, it's good. 11,400 for damage. HE shell damage is a bit higher. And also do keep in mind, 381 millimeters, which means you are going to be able to overmatch, you know, the tier 6, tier 7 battleship bows. 25 millimeter bows, no problem for the Queen Elizabeth. All in all, guns, not really much of an issue for the QE, even though her penetration is a little bit worse than the Warspite, but I did not notice it when I played her. Secondary armament, 4.2 kilometers. You've got some of them, but really it's not much. You do have better AA defense than the Warspite on the QE, so that is something. You know, you are a little bit safer against aircraft, but you know, it's not like the world's best AA that you can potentially get at tier 6. Although I would say potentially with like manual AA, you should be able to output a decent amount of damage still, nonetheless, with the large caliber AA guns. Maneuverability wise, maximum speed, the same as a Warspite at 23.5 knots. However, she is going to take longer to actually make a full circle, as a turning circle radius of 680 meters compared to the Warspite's 550 is a bigger circle. Yep. There is those subtle little differences, right? Like I said. However, all in all, my experience playing with the Queen Elizabeth is that, you know, if you kind of like the way Warspite plays, QE is going to play somewhat similarly, and yeah, you should be able to do equally well with her. But then, you know, I would say at least tier 6, the ship is still okay. It's still okay. Unfortunately, once you get past the QE, you know, you've had this sort of a nice high for a while. Iron Duke, not so much, but, you know, you get a high with the tier 4 and the tier 3, a sort of a meh tier 5. You got a decent experience at tier 6, and then you just hit, I don't even know, you hit like rock freaking bottom with King George V. I didn't like the ship, and I forced myself to play her a number of battles, and even though my battle results weren't bad, and this is important, my battle results with her weren't bad, I was still getting, you know, a damage output on average to be somewhat similar to my other tier 7 battleships, but just, she wasn't comfortable to play. You know, this was not a comfortable battleship to play. There was a lot of little things that just made you very aggravated towards this battleship. Protection-wise, the King George V is a weird one. She's got very good sort of citadel protection, so you're not really likely to be getting shells into the KG5's citadel, right? I mean, it's underwater, it's spaced, you're just not going to have much luck getting at that citadel. However, the entire upper deck and forward and aft bow areas, only 25 millimeters. Now, you might be going, hey, wait a minute, the Conqueror has the same problem, right? And her HE damage really hurts. Yeah, it does, but remember, the Conqueror gets that ludicrous heal. King George V doesn't, and if you start taking focus fire from HE, you're just in for a world of pain. KG5, by the way, if you haven't gotten that skill, absolutely mandatory, must have fire extinguishing. You have to get those 2 center fires into only 1 fire. Otherwise, you're just going to die way too quickly. I mean, hell, even with 1 fire, sometimes I died really quickly. So, King George V, just the survivability, again, against sort of citadel hits might be okay, but just HE will massively ruin your day when you're playing the KG5. Then, of course, once you get past the protection, you look at the guns, and you're like, maybe the guns offer something. No, no, it doesn't. The KG-5's guns are just... trying to find the best word here. Not to curse and say expletives, but good God, are the guns just not good on a ship like this. I mean, I've heard some people say, well, you should try to play her like the Scharnhorst. No, the Scharnhorst can be significantly more aggressive and be okay. The KG-5 can't. You try to get aggressive with the ship, you're just gonna get sunk. I try to play her in you know, passive mode, aggressive mode, and no, she doesn't do well in aggressive. The turrets just they just, you know, these guns, they just, ugh, man. I mean, their rate of fire is good, 25 seconds. You know, their turret traverse time is pretty good, 45 degrees. You know, horizontal dispersion, all really good. And even HE fire chance and HE damage, really good. But it's just, they're 356mm guns at tier 7. You run to other tier 7 battleships, they just laugh at you because you can't overmatch them when they angle. It's just really, really disappointing, and you just lack that punch. And it's weird because my experience with this battleship is with the guns is like this. You try to stay at range, and you almost like, you're forced to almost shoot HE, because when you shoot AP, it's not like you do all that well. And then, so you're almost like, okay, if I want to do better with AP, you gotta get closer, and then of course you get wrecked in closer distances. It just, KG-5, this ship, I really wanted to like the ship, but just couldn't. So, unfortunately, real letdown. And also, the other thing, her dispersion is very random at times. You know, sometimes you get blocks. Literally, you fire like your forward 6 guns and you see this block of shells go out, and you're just like, wow, if that thing hits, whew, you know, like if I hit a cruiser with that block, it's gonna be devastating. And then on other times, you fire and just like, what in the world of God was that thing? It was just like massive shotgun spreads. KG-5 for me was just, not a good ship. Just no. This was like the stinker in the line. Which might explain why Nelson became a free XP tier 7 British battleship. Maybe they really want people to go for that to replace this. Just... Okay. Moving on. Away from that. A defense on the KG-5 is... nothing really to write home about. It's okay-ish, you know, but nothing really spectacular. Moving on. Going on to maneuverability. So, 28 knots is the max speed. You can make it a little bit faster with the flag. Now, some people say, well, play it like a battle cruiser, like kind of like the way Scharnhorst plays. Not really. Scharnhorst is just faster. She just feels more responsive. And she's just got better armor and protection. So, you know, Scharnhorst, you don't mind getting into more of those up-close brawls. KG-5, just, no. She's almost like this want to play one way, but forced to play another way, in which she does good in neither of those ways. You know, she's not a good battle cruiser. She's not really that good of a pure battleship either. She's just weird right now. Weird kind of ship. Turning circle radius, 790 meters, not that awful for a ship this size. Rudder shift time, 12 seconds, is reasonably fast. You do have pretty good concealment. So that can work if you use it, you know, to its absolute limits and just sort of sneak up and shoot stuff. But again, if you don't nuke stuff outright, which these guns do at times seem to have problems with, then you get focus fired and die. But once you get past the KG-5, you know, it's like, this is the one stinker on the ship. You get past it, and things start to look up, right? First ship afterwards you get is the Monarch. And the Monarch was the big surprise for me, because initially I looked at her and I'm like, she's just like a KG-5. What's improved here? What's making this ship better? Well, a couple things. First things first, instead of 25mm armor everywhere, which gets wrecked by HE and then wrecked by any battleship with guns larger than 380mm, the Monarch actually has 32mm of armor everywhere. which means that, yes, you're still vulnerable to HE, but at least you can now angle against those battleship guns, with the exception of the Yamato, but the Yamato is always going to be the exception. So at least you're going to now be able to angle against other battleships, and that will allow you to stay alive that much longer. Her survivability difference between the Monarch and the KG-5 was dramatic. I mean, I was immediately able to go, yep, this ship, I'm able to be that much safer and that much more involved in a battle. Not likely to get wrecked that easily, right? On top of that, the Monarch has the other improvements. One of them being the weapons. 381mm guns in 3 triple turrets. These guns reload quickly. KG-5 guns reload quickly, but like I said, the guns themselves are just absolutely anemic. It's like, you're just like, what is wrong with your guns? The Monarch's guns, they work consistently, and you're all of a sudden going to go back to smacking other ships for good damage. You're going to be smacking battleships for damage, and, you know, cruisers, you're going to be able to hurt them now. This is a big difference, and on top of the fact that you are able to get a 25-second reload is phenomenal. I believe with the numbers, somebody's crunched, the Monarch's penetration is pretty close to what the Bismarck gets. Maybe not as good, but pretty darn close. And of course, you also have that nice advantage of having 6 of your guns forward in triple turrets, which means that you're not really losing any of the forward firepower that you had in the KG-5, except now these guns are that much more effective. So that, coupled with that fast rate of fire, just very nice. I like the Monarch's guns, and this ship was just like, I liked her. I really, really liked her. Even though she doesn't get the super heal. She doesn't have the super heal, but I liked her that much more. And I'll actually get to the heal thing in a little bit too. Most of the Royal Navy battleships, up until Tier 8, have pretty much standard battleship heals. You know, they heal 14% per charge, and they're just pretty standard things all there. But, of course, Tier 9 and 10 is going to be a little bit different, although I do have a thought about those battleships, but I'll get to that when I get to that. AA-wise, the Monarch, not that bad. Large caliber AA, a little bit, but you do have a decent amount of 40mm bofors, and their damage is okay. Maneuverability and speed, all alright. You know, 28 knots, 790-meter turn radius, 12-second rudder shift time. Once again, the British battleships do shift their rudders very, very quickly, so that is a nice big plus. And of course, concealment, 12.7 kilometers. With the concealment module, of course, you know, with the captain skills, you can get that down even more. So Monarch is going to be that nice stealthy battleship as well. All in all, I liked her. You know, this was a surprise for me because at first I didn't think she'd be anything special, but really liked her. And I think, you know, out of all the ships, she's going to be the surprise for most people. Most people are going to get to the ship, play her, and be like, whoa, you know, pleasantly surprised by this particular battleship. Moving past the Monarch, and you start to get into the ridiculous heal zone, you know, Royal Navy battleships. The first one being the Lion. Now, the Lion really had no noticeable weaknesses, with the one exception that, yes, she is still covered in 32mm of armor everywhere, and the same will apply to the Conqueror. She's covered in 32mm everywhere. So, yes, you are going to be vulnerable to that HE, you know, especially from the heavy cruisers. But then again, you do have that heal. You do have that heal. And for the Lion and the Conqueror, that heal is just, well, you're basically rebuilding your ship while you're at sea. Although I do have a thought. Now, I definitely I've had people in the last video just say that I'm out to get the Royal Navy battleships and I want them nerfed to hell. No, I don't. I don't want them nerfed to hell. I just want them to be somewhat well balanced. And I do recognize that, yeah, it's covered in 32mm of armor, so you are going to take more HE damage from heavy cruisers, which means that you are going to need a better heal. Not going to deny that. However, the current heal, 40%, and if you throw on a flag on top of that, I mean, it just heals a ludicrous amount of HP. If my math is correct, if you have a heal flag equipped, the Lion heals almost 48% of its HP per heal. And I think that, and the Conqueror as well, which is the exact same percentage, is a little bit on the excessive side. However, while playing today, I did find that you know, if I took the flag away, the Lion's heal actually became, and the Conqueror actually, without the flag, their two heals became just a little bit more acceptable, perhaps. So almost what I'm thinking is maybe a better way, you know, and of course from what I've heard, that they're going to be changing some stuff about their guns and stuff like that, which I'll get to in a second, but maybe what the Lion and Conqueror should do in terms of the, you know, the heal is to have it so that it heals, you know, 30% maybe without a flag, and then with a flag getting close to the current maybe sort of 40-ish%, but maybe not as high as that, maybe like 37%, something like that. I think in that kind of scenario, you still have a really, really good heal, right? And that's kind of what I was hoping for, is to have that heal that not like game-breakingly high heals, but, you know, still have a heal that is able to at least mitigate this one weakness of eating a lot of HE damage, right? I did mention, of course, having fire extinguishing skill does really improve the survivability of all British battleships, especially Lion and Conqueror. Having only one center fire will really mitigate a lot of the damage. Still, I do think having a slightly weaker heal is not a bad idea at all. Not to like say, let's nerf it to a normal 14% heal, but something along the lines of maybe like a 30%, where if you throw on a flag, you'll get somewhat closer to the current default heal, right? Where you would still have to play your battleship a little bit more carefully and take advantage of things like your stealth and stuff like that, while being able to at least deal with that incoming HE damage. Alright, 419mm guns on the Lion when fully upgraded. Good guns. You know, they do good damage. Dispersion is good. Reload time, unfortunately, is back to the very standard 30 seconds. Turret traverse time, 45 seconds. But all in all, you know, good ship. You know, the guns perform well. They also have really high HE, and not only HE damage, but really high fire chance. I mean, in theory, you could just play as a fire spamming support battleship and just burn all the other angled battleships to a crisp, and it works. You could do the exact same thing with Conqueror if you so wish, but, you know, perfectly viable strategy. Lion's AA, nothing to laugh at. Pretty good AA, although large caliber damage is not as high, but again, the 40mm damage is quite substantial. You're getting quite a good amount of damage out of your 40mm bofors. Maneuverability in terms of max speed, 29.5 knots. Nice speedy battleship. Turning circle radius, 830 meters, is definitely not bad. Rudder shift time, again, very, very fast, 12.7 seconds. You know, the one thing you'll notice about the British battleships when you play them is you ask the rudder to start turning in a direction, and there it goes. You know, the rudder does turn very, very quickly. And, of course, the Lion also has that Royal Navy stealth. All in all, I would say the Lion in its current form right now, you know, with the heal that it has right now, I really can't see any major flaws with the ship. The ship is very, very good. And then, of course, you go from Lion and, of course, to Conqueror. And you guys know what my opinion on the Conqueror is so far. This battleship is, oh boy. In her current form, with her 2.0 Sigma, her, you know, absolutely ridiculous 47% heal when you have that flag, her crazy high fire chance, her really good AA, the fact that she's not a slow battleship by any stretch of the imagination, fast rudder shift, super stealth. Yeah, it's just, Conqueror right now makes no sense. But again, if they start to deal with the Conqueror in a certain way, like let's say nerfing the heal a little bit, you know, reducing the Sigma down to like 1.8, I think the Conqueror will still be a very good battleship, but just much more balanced compared to everything else. You know, you're still going to have that heal that can bring you back, but just not like, hey, I'm going to rebuild, you know, whichever part of my ship got damaged, like right here on the ship kind of thing. You're not going to have that, but you're still going to have a pretty good heal. At least that's what I think, or I hope they're eventually going to do. Because in the current state, being able to heal 48% of your HP in one heal is just a little bit nuts. But yeah, that's it. That's the overall take on the Royal Navy battleships. What do you all think? Are you looking forward to them now that you've sort of seen them? What do you think about the King George V? Do you think there's anything they can do about it? Do you like the way they've made her so far? Because I I didn't. You know, are you looking forward to trying her out? Do you have any other ideas of maybe how to make King George V work? I mean, yeah, because I didn't like the ship. And really, on the whole line, she's the real stinker. And the one ship I think I really just despise playing. But everything else I thought was at least, you know, pretty darn good. With, of course, the lowest tiers and the highest tiers being some of the best around, I think. Anyways, folks, that does it for me today. I am going to get ready, get packed, and get ready to take off. So until next week, folks, take care, have yourselves a good one, and I'll talk to all of you again then.